Okay, so what we're going to do here, we've got a function, and on the second set of axes here, I'm going to try to plot the gradient function. Now, in order to make this clear, I'm going to make up a table where I'll have my x coordinate and then the gradient. Now, let's go across here from -6, -5, -4, -3, -2, -1. We're going to need a longer table. And then 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now, I can see that the gradient of this curve is 0 at -4. The tangent here would be horizontal. So the gradient is 0 there. Also, at 1, the gradient is 0. Now, some of these other gradients, I'm going to be making them up. They're not going to be exact for this curve, but it serves to make our point. Along here, this section, we can see that the curve has a negative gradient. And let's just say here at -5, the gradient of the tangent there is -1. And at 6 we can see it's steeper. Let's say the gradient there is -2. Coming across at -3 we might say the gradient is now 1 because we can see it's positive along this section. And at -2 we might say the gradient is 2. And at -1 we might say the gradient again is 2. And at 0, just here, we might say the gradient is 1. And then we come past the turning point here, and let's say at 2 that this gradient is now -1. Notice how the gradient is now negative along this section. And then at 3, oh, it's definitely steeper, so that's going to be -2. And at 4, I'm going to say the gradient's -3. I'm saying these aren't correct gradients. I'm just indicating the fact that it's getting steeper as we go along. Let's say it's -4 there. And let's say the gradient's -5. So when we plot the gradient function, what we're doing is using the same x coordinates where we found the gradients, but the gradient now becomes the y coordinate on this graph. Now always the first ones to plot are the zeros. So -4, 0. And 1, 0. So we can see the gradient function crosses the axis whenever we have a stationary point. So that would be a max. That one's actually a min. Or a max. Also, if we had a horizontal point of inflection. So, now let's put the other gradients on. -6, -2. -5, -1. -3, 1. -2, 2. -1, 2, 0, 1, 2, -1, 3, -2, 4, -3, 5, -4, 6, -5. So because of the values I've chosen, actually we get sort of a straight line sections like this, but we can see that in reality that's much more likely to be a curve that goes through here like so. Let's try and put that curve onto the same axes over here. So actually what I'm going to do is get rid of all my red writing on this, just to make things clearer. And so 0 at the turning point, 0 at the turning point. The gradient along here is negative, and it's steep as we go this way. So it's going to be more negative down here, and then it's going to come in towards 0. Then along this section, the gradient is positive. And initially, if we just look at it over here, it's at the minimum turning point and it comes up to the maximum turning point. So it gets steeper as we go around here, but then gets shallower here. So this gradient is positive, but it's going to be more positive in the middle. So it's going to be a higher positive value, as we saw here. So it's going to do something like that. And then it's negative and becoming more negative as we go down here. So the gradient will become more negative, i.e. the y-coordinate gets further down the graph, a more negative number.